Hi, I'm Tom,
And I'm Ellie.
and welcome to another episode of But He's Catholic, where I try to share my layman's understanding of the Catholic faith with my agnostic wife. And I think Eddie's got quite a big question for today's episode.
Yes, it is probably the most controversial one that we've had on the show so far, but topical given that it's Easter coming up. And it's genuinely one of those questions that I've always kind of been baffled by. So, how do Catholics, I guess, genuinely believe in the resurrection? To me, it's just too mind-boggling. I really don't mean to offend anybody, but obviously it didn't happen because you can't come back from the dead. Whereas I know that obviously you have said in the past you 100% believe that it did genuinely happen. So I guess I just wanted to kind of understand in more depth that thinking.
The resurrection of Jesus on Easter Sunday.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he's been dead for 3 days and then suddenly miraculously.
We kind of jumped the story, haven't we? So we haven't talked about Good Friday or anything, but yeah. So he's crucified and dies, and then he's buried in a stone tomb, and then 3 days later, which I think the significance of the 3 days is that in Judaism, of the first century, that 3 days is like you're considered like
Definitely dead.
which is why it's
Okay.
after 3 days.
Okay, that's interesting.
So that's when you can confirm someone's died, because I think I guess back then they're not able to
Right, the science isn't
they're
there.
they're not able to scientifically, medically, like we can now, confirm that you're dead.
Yeah.
So 3 days it's you're dead.
Yeah.
So that's why it's 3 days.
Okay, that's a great fact. Still not explaining how and.
Well, I think it's the central belief of the Catholic faith, actually.
Yeah.
The fact in episode 4, this is your question. It's quite a big one. It's the question: is the resurrection?
It's a difference between people who are atheist and the people who are Christian or Catholic. I don't know if all Christian. Do you think all Christians believe in
All
it?
Christians are required to believe in the resurrection. Is literal.
No, every denomination.
Every denomination, as far as I'm aware, has to believe in the resurrection.
Right.
So it's in the Nicene Creed. So everything in the Nicene Creed that was created at the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, everything in that Nicene Creed has to be believed by all Christians. But for most Christians to consider you another Christian.
Right. Whereas I think that's one of those things that anybody who's not Christian just cannot fathom. It's like, that just can't happen, and therefore, how could I possibly believe in it? And I think for me, it's probably one of the things that holds me back from saying, confidently, I'm Catholic, because there's a handful of them, things like the body and blood of Christ in church, but we can come on to that another time. But there's just a handful of things where I'm like, because I don't believe that, I don't think I can ever say that I'm Catholic. And maybe you can convince me that I'm wrong, but as a teacher, I've had to teach it, and I've had to look into it in detail, and I still just can't really bring myself to believe it. So convince me.
I mean, I'm not going to be able to convince you in a podcast episode. Maybe we could turn this into another series where I try and convince you of the resurrection. But we can talk about bits of evidence. But I think let's talk about the nature of the belief, of what is Catholic understanding of the belief itself, rather than trying to maybe prove to you that it's true.
Okay.
And maybe that could be a second episode. We can talk about evidence. But I think as explaining the actual belief is that it is the central belief of the Christian faith is that Jesus died, buried. 3 days later, he roses from the dead, and I think most importantly, it is not a metaphor.
Yeah.
It literally happened. It is a historical event.
Right.
And I think that's really important with Christianity in particular, to think of it as a religion of history. There is historical evidence for everything we believe, that unlike, I guess, other faiths, now obviously there are metaphors in the Bible, but the New Testament is all true.
Yeah.
There are allegorical stories in the Old Testament, but primarily the Christian faith, the Christian Catholic faith is a historical faith.
Yeah.
It's not like other faiths which are full of analogies and some faiths that are full of just metaphorical stories to understand the world. Well, we believe in historical truth, and the resurrection is a historical fact.
Which just makes me think of Tom Holland, actually, and his "I'm a I'm an atheist,
Yeah.
but actually I'm a historian, and having a look at the historical sources,
Yeah.
like I kind of feel like I should believe in Christianity because there is all the sources there. That's kind
Exactly.
of his like USP, is that like actually having looked into Christianity, studied it as a historian, is very, very convincing.
Yeah, and he hasn't been able to bring himself to actually believe in the Christian faith, but I think he's just one step away, because he essentially is saying, like, he thinks, based on all the historical sources, and we can go into this in more detail later, but based on all the historical evidence, like, the apostles genuinely believe what they're saying has happened.
Yeah, so Tom Holland, if you're listening, that'd be amazing. Let us know your thoughts on that evidence that you as a historian have discovered that's convinced you. That would be very interesting.
J.R.R. Tolkien calls it the central event in all of history. And I think
Right.
I want to really emphasise that, like, this is a faith it's of history. Like, these are historical events that literally happened. And yeah, J.R. Tolkien calls it the event in history that all other history, the Second World War, the Cold War, like Tudors, all history hangs on that single event of the resurrection.
And am I right in thinking, again, based on like the little I've done in my teaching, is that part of the explanation is that at that time in history, everyone was looking for a Messiah. They knew one was like due to come.
Exactly.
And it was a case of there was this guy whose like whole point of his existence was to come and then give everyone salvation by sacrificing his life, but then rising again, and that's like showing it's a miracle.
No, actually.
No? Okay.
So the Jewish faith.
I've been teaching the children things that are incorrect.
They were all waiting for a Messiah, and there's lots of Jesus lives at a time period where it's very like a messianic time where like lots of people keep popping up to be the Jewish Messiah,
Right.
and the Messiah that's kind of prophesied by the prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and all that. But they think their understanding of it is like a conquering Messiah, like a Messiah that's gonna like a war leader, like is going to come and conquer the Romans. So like that's why I think people actually, a lot of the apostles are disappointed. So the sign like Judas, he's disappointed because he thought the Messiah that's been prophesied, or their understanding of the prophet, is like a conquering Messiah who's going to come and defeat the enemies of the Jewish people and conquer the world and deliver them their salvation that way.
Whereas this is a carpenter who is very like chilled.
A carpenter who gets executed as a low, dirty criminal in the worst way possible, and then gets thrown into a tomb and rises from the dead, and he doesn't come after his enemies, does he? He doesn't like burst into the temple and start beating people up or go after the Romans. He doesn't go and like beat up Pontius Pilate. He just rises from the dead and keeps saying to everyone he meets, "Peace be with you."
Yeah.
And so it's much
no revenge.
There is no revenge. What their understanding, but they are right. I think their understanding of the Messiah that's the more like, for our Christians, that's the second coming.
Right.
That kind of conquering Messiah who comes back in glory. They were seeing, instead of we now understand it as it's two comings, the first coming and the second coming, they thought it was going to happen the first time. And Peter thinks this as well, because in the Bible it talks about him cutting off the ear when they try and, do you know, in the Good Friday story where Peter takes out his sword and cuts off someone's ear when they're trying to arrest Jesus to go and crucify him.
Oh.
And why does he have this sword? Because again, some argue it's because he thinks that he still has this belief that Jesus is the Messiah. He's the conquering one that's going to defeat their enemies. Yeah, so he needs a sword rather than the kind of meek, helpless, sacrificial victim that he actually is.
And so you used to think that there's going to be like a second coming, like a second Messiah, any day now?
Well, that can be another episode. We're going down a
bit of a rabbit hole.
But yeah, let's go back to the resurrection.
In terms of the resurrection, again, having taught it, we've had to look at like some Bible extracts to talk about the details that are in the Bible. Mm-hmm. So I know that it's like washerwomen, isn't it, who come across the open.
It's the Marys.
tomb.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the Marys who come across it. The tomb's open, they go in, there's like the cloths but it's otherwise empty. They run and get some men who then come, and there's like a ghost or something there. Some kind
angel,
of, okay, yeah. Some kind of, spirit. Who I presume says something, I don't remember what.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that Jesus has basically like hidden his form, and he's wandering around talking to people, and only when they want to see it do they see that it's him.
Yeah.
So you can elaborate. That's my
so the
basic
story,
knowledge.
there's a little bit of variation between the Gospels, but I think the one that's always read on Easter Sunday, we'll go with that one, that essentially, there is, he's buried in a tomb, and they've rolled a stone in front of the tomb. The Roman soldiers were guarding it to make sure, because they thought this would happen. They were worried. The reason why they guard it, and they say this in the Bible, is because they're worried the apostles were going to come back in the night, steal the body, and then claim that he'd risen from the dead.
Okay, so they didn't think he would rise from the dead. They were worried.
They were worried he was going to claim to be risen from the dead. So that's why they've put one, like, been put in a stone tomb, but they've put the Roman soldiers there as guards. Sometime in the night, Jesus.
Oh, sorry. Actually, just a thought.
Yeah.
Is that the norm of the time, to put someone in a stone tomb like
It's
that?
a wealthy person's tomb. Okay. Joseph of Arimathea, whose tomb it is, he's one of the. He's quite high up in the temple. Right. I can't think of the word, but he's quite high up in the temple, and he's a secret follower of Jesus. But when he dies, he offers him his stone-cut tomb. So that's not a normal person's tomb.
Okay.
That's someone's quite wealthy, so it's his followers that give it to him. And he's wrapped up in his cloths, the burial cloths.
The Shroud of Turin.
The Shroud, we'll come on to that if we do an episode on evidence. And he's laid inside the tomb. And sometime during the night, he has risen from the dead. The belief is that he's gone down into hell. So during the 3 days, so on Holy Saturday, we call that the harrowing of hell. Right. So the idea is descended into hell. He's then gone there to, as the sacrificial Lamb of God, he's gone there to, so he's died, he's gone to hell, and then he's kind of atoning for our sins in hell, but also going to break those, because you tend to see these paintings where, in the harrowing of hell, where he's gone down and he breaks Adam and Eve out of.
To bring them to heaven.
So he's breaking the people out of, that have gone into the underworld and are awaiting for...
I guess
they're not in hell. I think it's more like
purgatory.
Not even that. It's more like there's nothing, because all that stuff requires Jesus' resurrection to have happened, to exist. I think. But yeah, the idea is that he's gone down into hell.
I guess bringing them salvation.
Yeah, and he's bringing them salvation, and him going to hell himself kind of destroys that link between us dying and going to hell. So he's atoned for our sins by going into hell himself, and is breaking out all those souls that are locked into the underworld, and he's bringing them to heaven. So that's going on.
Lovely.
Yeah, and I mean,
lucky then.
You could probably do a whole episode on the harrowing of hell, so we could do that later.
Maybe next year. I don't think we've got enough time to do all the Easter things.
And then he's risen from the dead. He's rolled the stone away. Something has happened to those Roman soldiers. We're not sure. It doesn't really elaborate. Have they run away in fear because
the tomb opened? Yeah,
the tomb opened and some guys just come out. Probably. Did they just wander off because they got bored earlier and haven't seen anything?
I guess it's been 3 days, so they're like, ugh, this is a bit pointless, isn't it?
Yeah. Did they just give up and go drink? Like, yeah. We don't know why they've disappeared, but what is it's the Jewish Sabbath. That's why they bury him really quickly on the evening. And then because they've been traditional Jews at the time, they've stayed at home.
Right. Yeah.
So they haven't come visit. So the women come in the morning at the end of Sabbath, so they can come up in the morning and they find the empty tomb. And that is, we'll talk more about it in evidence. But the reason why that's really interesting is that women can't give evidence at the time.
Yes, I've heard that.
If their witness isn't valid in court.
Right.
So
they couldn't say what they've seen.
No.
It would be redundant.
And then an angel appears and tells them that Jesus has risen from the dead. And they go and tell Peter and the apostles. And then that's when Peter and what we think is Peter and John go check out the tomb themselves. And that's when they go in and they find all the shrouds and the burial cloths just on the floor.
So the angel doesn't speak to them?
Angel doesn't speak to them.
Okay, just the ladies.
Just the, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Right, so it's got to the point where they've discovered that the tomb is empty. Then what about the bit about what Jesus is up to as he's left?
So he's gone to visit people.
Any people or
Yes. He's going to visit mostly the apostles, and there are others that he's recorded. So there's one where he meets those travellers on the road,
yes.
and then they go for dinner, and then he breaks the bread, and they suddenly realise that it's him. So he's doing things like that. He seems to be travelling around.
How exactly does breaking the bread, is it like, does he do some kind of miracle? Or is it literally just because he breaks the bread, suddenly it's an epiphany to the others?
I think it's because that is something that I've never fully understand myself. Like,
Yeah.
I think what is happening is they're not, for some reason, they're not recognising him.
I guess maybe it's almost...
He's committing that action that he did at the Last Supper where he broke the bread. And then we've been doing an episode on Maundy Thursday, but performs the breaking of the bread at the Last Supper. And then it's as if, when people have certain, like, quirks on the way they act.
Yeah.
And you might see it in someone and you think, oh, that suddenly makes me think of that person.
Like if you see someone's walk and you're like, oh, that's so-and-so's walk.
Exactly. They see him breaking the bread and then suddenly like, hang on.
Also, to be fair to them, if they're like, this guy's dead, why would you meet them and think, oh, this looks like this person who I know is dead?
Exactly. So I'm never sure whether it's something like supernatural going on, or whether it's just a psychological thing where they just can't recognise him because obviously he's dead.
Well, and also I guess like it's a completely different time to us. Like there's no photos. There's like very little probably recorded of his appearance other than word of mouth.
Well, these people are very close to him, so we're assuming that they knew what he looked like if they're the...
they're his friends?
Yeah.
They're not just...
No, not friends. So, but I think that, they were there at the Last Supper, and I think just that moment of him doing the thing they associate with him, that action, they suddenly recognise him.
Right. So he goes and sees his friends. He then... Is there anybody else he like specifically goes to visit?
Apparently, so John's Gospel does talk about saying that it's like lots and lots of times where he is doing lots of things and appearing to people that aren't recorded.
Okay.
And he says specifically, like, he says explicitly the reason why we haven't recorded all of this is just because it would take so long to actually just go through, like, every time he goes and visits someone or says this to this person. It would basically be bigger than the Bible, and we haven't got space kind of thing. But the main events are the Pentecost, which when the Holy Spirit comes down, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, completely need to explain that to me.
Yeah, that's another episode. His ascension into heaven, when he goes back to heaven, and also when he goes to see Doubting Thomas. So all in the room, because they're hiding because they're worried the Romans and the Jewish leaders are going to come get them now they've crucified Jesus. And then they're in the tomb, and the apostles are like, no, we've seen Jesus. Like, he's risen from the dead, his tomb's empty. We've seen someone's seen some angels saying that he's risen from the dead, and Doubting Thomas is saying, no, that's just hasn't happened.
Right, so is he like the one of the 12 disciples who's saying, I don't believe it?
Yeah.
Okay. And does he come around in the end?
Yeah, so and then he comes and appears before Thomas, and
Jesus comes
and says, touch my wounds, and he shows him his hands and there's the wounds on his side and shows him the holes in his hands. And
gosh, that's a fair point. So that he's still got all the wounds. Yes, he's not like he's risen from the dead, but he's not managed to heal his cuts.
No. So he's risen from the dead, but he's still got his holes in his feet, the spear wound in his side, and the holes in his hands.
I mean, that's quite convincing evidence, isn't it?
And then Thomas like kind of and puts his fingers to the holes in his hands, and he says, my Lord, my God. Suddenly, and the Doubting Thomas believes because he has seen. But Jesus says, there's plenty of people like us who will believe without seeing. But Doubting Thomas couldn't believe it until he literally touched the wounds and seen Jesus alive.
That's quite good. I mean, obviously I'm thinking it as a story, but no, obviously it's fact and everything. But I guess that's quite good because it's showing like there's a lot of Christians who might not believe or might struggle to believe it. Like I've said, it's quite like hard to comprehend. So to be like, actually there was this other guy who was there, who was really close with Jesus, who he himself didn't really believe it, said it couldn't possibly happen, and was convinced. And therefore you Christians who are doubting should also be convinced.
Yeah. I think, like, obviously it's completely mental, the belief that someone was brutally murdered and 3 days later rises from the dead. But as, like, J.R.R. Tolkien says, like, this is the most important event in history. And if this isn't true,
then nothing's true.
Well, no, completely. if that resurrection doesn't happen, the whole of the Christian faith is completely pointless.
And then I guess the Christian faith has trickled into everything in society, even if we're not conscious of it. All our values, even in an atheist culture, we've got fundamental like Christian values warped into the way we view the world.
I don't know. I feel like
No, because non-Christian cultures have a very different viewpoint of the world, and their
that's very
normality
true.
is.
And okay, yeah, does our morality hang on the resurrection? Yes, actually. I was going to disagree with you, but no, you're right. I think maybe the Christian morality, because all the nice fluffy things that Jesus says has to be backed up by the resurrection. Because otherwise you're like, well, that failed. All your nice, like, turn the other cheek. Like, if he then just got crucified and that was the end of that, you'd be like, well, that was a pretty silly system, wouldn't it? Whereas the fact he rises from the dead and actually there is an inexorable victory. Like, in the end, you win, no matter what happens to you. So follow Christian morality and be a good person, etc. That, you're right, that has to hang on the resurrection, because otherwise, like, you're not going to risk yourself for this faith if the resurrection's not true, because if you just got crucified and that was the end of that, because, well, where's the why would you follow those rules? So yeah, you're right. Yeah, the Christian morality hangs on it. But like, just going back to like the Christian faith, everything, going to church, holy water, baptisms, like getting married, like none of that has any meaning if the resurrection didn't literally happen. If it's not a literal historical fact, then it didn't happen. I think there was a Protestant writer, but he was an atheist. I can't remember his name, but he wrote a book called Who Moved the Stone? Right. And his thing was, he realised if I disprove the resurrection, like the Christian faith is pointless. Like, to defeat the Christian faith, I need to disprove the resurrection happened, because that's actually what this all hangs on.
And presumably he didn't.
No, he did all his research and he came to actually believe that the resurrection actually happened. But we can talk about that in an episode when we talk about the evidence. I did just realise I said Pentecost happened, and that's one of the events after Jesus' resurrection. It is an event after Jesus' resurrection, but that happens after his ascension. So the big things are, going back to your question, correcting my mistake, the big things are him visiting various people, especially the one where he meets his followers on the road, and also when he sees doubting Thomas, and then his ascension into heaven. But no, not Pentecost. Pentecost happens later.
So
I just realised.
With the ascension, how long does he hang around after he's risen? So between...
I'd have to double check, but I think it's only a couple of weeks.
Right, okay, yeah.
Maybe not even that long. I'd have to double check, but it's a very short time period. He's not here for a couple of years, no. It's not like he does 10 years and then goes up.
So it's basically like he's got his to-do list.
Yeah.
He races around ticking off the to-do list, and then he's like, right, I'm off.
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. And the ascension is basically just him going to heaven. It's as simple as that.
We can do an episode on that.
But... A whole episode on ascending to heaven?
Yeah, I think everything deserves an episode.
True. One other question, and you might not be able to answer this, it's one that my kids keep asking when we've been doing the Easter story, and they're obsessed with, because of course they're children, they keep coming back to like chocolate eggs and the Easter bunny.
Yeah.
One of them said, and I wasn't able to answer, and I said I'd research, one of them said, is the reason we have chocolate eggs because it's representing the stone that was pushed to the side?
That's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, because I think I sort of said to them, like, I'm not sure. It may be, but more likely it's to do with, like, rebirth. And it's spring, so, like, chicks are laying eggs. You got spring chickens.
I think it's more a metaphor for the resurrection, rebirth, new life, spring.
That's what I said I thought it was.
I thought the analogy for, like, new life in spring, lambs being born, chickens laying.
Yeah, I thought it'd be a bit random to be like, the egg represents the stone that was pushed aside. But I just thought it was quite an interesting idea, like you do get from kids.
Or does it represent the tomb? Because they're all hollow eggs, aren't they?
And nothing's inside.
And nothing's inside. I don't know. And that might be true, actually. I've never had that. I thought it was an analogy for
new
life and resurrection and rebirth and all that.
Like I say, kids come out with these things and you're like, it's like the most far-fetched link. But I just thought it was an interesting point. And I guess if anybody out there has a theory, like we'd love to hear it. And if you've heard that or you know something about that, that would be really interesting to know. But maybe you just agree with us and think it's just an analogy for new life.
Yeah, Google. Was it, we always say as teachers when they ask questions, we're like, oh, well, why don't you research it?
That's your homework.
You tell me next lesson. Yeah, I think before we finish up, have you got any more questions?
No, I think that's everything.
I think your question of how do Catholics understand the resurrection, the key takeaway is we believe it to be a literal historical event that has happened on which everything hangs, and that there was a man, Jesus Christ, who was killed, buried, rose again from the dead 3 days later, and when he descended into hell to atone for our sins, and then has resurrected, and this all literally happened.
Yeah, I do feel like, having spoken about this for like half an hour, we're still no closer to answering my question of like, how can Catholics bring themselves, or Christians in general, bring themselves to really genuinely believe that something happened where a guy came back from the dead, because it's so hard to fathom. So I definitely think we need to do another episode where we look at the evidence.
But surely, but you do appreciate the fact that, like, if this doesn't happen, then it's all just dressing up.
Yeah, I can understand that.
What is the point of anything?
The whole
this
point,
isn't a literal event.
The whole point is that by being resurrected, he has proven that he is who he says he is.
He's proven he's God, but not only is he proven he's God, but he's also atoned for our sins.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. I completely understand the belief, and this comes up so much with Catholicism and me. Like, I completely understand the viewpoint and the thinking.
Yeah.
But I can't bring myself to that mentality.
Yeah.
But maybe we can share some evidence.
We'll do an episode on evidence.
And I'd be really interested to hear what actual evidence is, because I think my scientific brain wants clear cut. Here's some proof, and then you can evaluate the proof.
Don't worry. I love a bit of, because as a history teacher, I'd love a bit of source analysis.
Exactly.
So we will do a whole episode on primary source analysis.
Next week?
Yeah, we'll do that next week.
Might as well
keep the ball rolling.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it.
And then we were going to do one in the lead up to Easter about Holy Week as well.
Yeah, I think that'd be good.
Oh, there's just too much to cram in before Easter though, because Good Friday, Monday, Thursday you want to do. So we might have to spread some of that out and do it next Easter. This is
a very complicated topic with...
Very key part of the Christian faith.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we might have to, if we're still around next year, then we have to maybe just do some of them next year.
Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you for sharing all of that with me. I've actually found some really fun facts there that I hadn't realised. And yeah, look forward to our more talk on the resurrection next week.
Looking forward to my secondary school source analysis.
This has been But He's a Catholic. I hope you enjoyed. Please make sure you subscribe, and you can go and follow us on Twitter at But He's Catholic as well. Goodbye.
Bye.